When I was a little girl, all I remember about Lag BaOmer was that there was always a Lag BaOmer field trip. I was in yeshiva, and all I remember is that we would always go to the park on Lag BaOmer and we would have a blast. And it really felt very different than the Sfirat HaOmer, the first 32 days of the Omer, where everything feels really sad. I remember Lag BaOmer feels happy. And in Israel and around the world, traditionally, people build bonfires. But when was the last time you really thought about what Lag BaOmer was about? Lag BaOmer actually marks two very famous events in Jewish history. The first one is bittersweet. Chazal tell us that Rabbi Akiva, the Gaon, the great Torah scholar of his generation and probably one of the greats of Jewish history, but he lived during the time period just prior to the Mishnah. Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students, and all of a sudden they all started dying of a plague. And that began at the very beginning of Sfirat HaOmer during Pesach, and only 33 days later, Lag Lamed Gimel, 33 days later, did the students stop dying. And so Lag BaOmer marks the stopping of the death of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva. And it's bittersweet because on the one hand, they stopped dying. And so we're happy about that. But on the other hand, can you imagine being Rabbi Akiva and watching 24,000 students die? That's part one of Lag BaOmer. Part two of Lag BaOmer is that it is the yahrzeit of Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was one of the 5 students with whom Rabbi Akiva started the second major chapter of his life. You see, after the 24,000 Talmidim died, Rabbi Akiva had to start again. And he gave smicha to only 5 students, one of whom was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And Rabbi Akiva's entire style of learning was darshaning the depths of the depths of the depths of Torah. Chazal tell us he entered what's known as Pardes. There are 4 levels of Torah: Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod, Pardes. And Rabbi Akiva was the only one mentioned by Chazal, mentioned by our sages, as being able to learn the deepest depths, the secrets of the Torah, and emerge completely just as strong as he was before. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai learned this from his Rabbi Akiva, this idea of digging deep. And although he lived during the time period of the persecution of the Romans, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we all know the story, he hid himself away, and the secret Torah was revealed to him, which the secret Torah had existed before, but it was revealed to him, and he is the one credited with authoring the Zohar, the book of Kabbalah that many people learn today. So what is the connection between these two events? Stopping of the deaths of Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students and the yahrzeit of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. One seems to be very bittersweet. One seems to focus on the stopping of death, but this very sad chapter. And one seems to talk about this brightness of Torah. We light a bonfire on Lag BaOmer, not just because on a yahrzeit we light a candle, but we light a bonfire because of this shining forth of Torah that Rashbi brought to the world. The word Zohar, the book that I spoke about earlier, is actually, the translation of Zohar means to illuminate, because what he brought into the world was this incredible illumination of Torah. So the question is, what's the connection? And this is just an idea that I have. You see, Rabbi Akiva is known as someone who was committed his entire life towards learning Torah. He fell in love with his wife. We know the story mentioned in Avot, Rabbi Natan, and he falls in love. He doesn't know a word of Torah. His wife encourages him to go to yeshiva, and he can't even read the Aleph Bet. And his father-in-law completely disinherits them because she is going to marry and then does marry this random shepherd boy. And he goes, and one day he sees this dripping water that's dripping on a rock, and he sees that it's carved out a hole in this rock, and Rabbi Akiva says, If the Torah can be like this water, then I'm good. Meaning, just like the water drip, 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 drips and causes a hole in this stone, so too, maybe Torah can have that effect on my heart. And even though I'm 40 years old, maybe there's a chance for me. And he goes and he learns with his son, and he learns the Aleph Bet with all the other, first graders or whatever it is. And his whole life is committed to Limud Torah. And he leaves his wife, she encourages him, she pushes him out the door to go learn for 12 years. And he comes back after studying with the greats of the great, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, sitting by their feet, just listening. And he comes back 12 years later with 12,000 students. And Rachel, his wife, sends Rabbi Akiva off again. And after 12 more years, he comes back. And this time he comes back with 24,000 students. And there's a source in Chazal that actually talks about this tremendous value that Rabbi Akiva had for Limud Torah. Him and Rabbi Tarfon and other Rabbanim were sitting together, and the question was asked, what is more important, learning Torah or the actions that we do? And Rabbi Tarfon said, actions are more important because Hashem judges us on our actions. But Rabbi Akiva said, no, it's learning Torah, showing the primacy that Limud Torah had in Rabbi Akiva's life. And in the end, the rabbis concluded, actually learning Torah is more important because it should lead to your actions. Limud Torah should shape the way that you act in your life. So we see Rabbi Akiva value Torah. But all of a sudden, in a later chapter of his life, he looks around and his 24,000 students have just died. All his hard work, all his shiurim, all his misora has just been lost. And it's unclear. Is this a punishment to Rabbi Akiva? Is being the survivor of that, is that a punishment? Is that a reward? And we'll never know the answer. But we can only imagine what it must have been like for Rabbi Akiva to look around and to see his legacy is gone. And not only is it gone, what do Chazal say? Why are these 24,000 Talmidim, why did they merit this terrible death? And Chazal say, Lo nahagu kavod zelazeh. They did not treat each other right. Can you imagine Rabbi Akiva, who's been teaching Torah his whole life, even having an inkling that maybe, just maybe, his students passed away because of the way that they were treating one another? And it's interesting because in Sefer Vayikra, in Parshat Kedoshim, we see there's a mitzvah, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You should love your friend as you love yourself. And Rabbi Akiva comes up and jumps up. And what does Rabbi Akiva say on this pasuk? Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. This is one of the fundamental pieces of the entire Torah. Wait a minute, you'd think that Rabbi Akiva would say learning Torah was maybe perhaps one of the most important pieces of Torah. What does it mean, loving your neighbor? That seems perhaps different than other things he said in the past. And so perhaps this is the answer. Maybe after all was said and done, Rabbi Akiva lived this beautiful life with his students teaching Torah. But maybe after all the blot of Gemara were finished and all the prakim of Tanakh were done, and he sees that they're no longer alive, maybe then he says, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The most important thing is loving your fellow friend, treating your fellow person like you would want to be treated, because that needs to be the foundation upon which you learn Torah. And if that is not stressed, then we have nothing. And so Lag BaOmer has these two aspects together. The aspect of the stopping of the deaths of Rabbi Akiva's students, which reminds us of why they died, which reminds us of the importance of treating each other right. But it also has the aspect of learning Torah, of Limud Torah, of this flame, this bonfire that the Rashbi brought into the world. But not only that, right now, the entire Omer period, what are we doing? We're working on ourselves. There's this tradition that we have to learn Pirkei Avot, to learn ethics of our fathers, to have us look inward and to think, how can I become kinder towards my fellow friend? And that all leads up to Matan Torah. You see, that's also not just the message of Lag BaOmer, but it's also going to be the message of Shavuot. And Chazal had an agenda with Shavuot also because, guess what? In just a few days from now, when we celebrate the giving of the Torah on Chag Shavuot, we're not just celebrating Har Sinai and the giving of the Torah. What did Chazal do? They actually included the reading of Megillah, Megillat Ruth. And Chazal say, what is Megillat Ruth? Kulo Chesed. The whole thing is about chesed, is about kindness. The kindness that Ruth does for her mother-in-law. And so the agenda of Lag BaOmer, of having these two different aspects to the day, not just on Lag BaOmer, of treating each other right and Limud Torah, but also on Shavuot. Matan Torah, the huge giving of the Torah by Har Sinai, but also Megillat Ruth, the message of remembering chesed, of remembering how we treat each other. This year in particular, all of us sort of have this forced introspection. We're, in a way, holed up in our homes, and we need to really think. We have to think about the incredible Torah that Rashbi gave us today on Lag BaOmer, and the depths that he brought to the public masses to some extent. But we also need to think about how we treat one another, and not just the community around us. But we need to think, how do we treat the people that live under our roof? How do we treat our parents? Some of us can't even be with our parents right now. How do we treat our grandparents? Again, some of us can't be with our grandparents. Do we take them for granted? Are we sometimes snippy with them? How do we treat our children? How do we treat our brothers, our sisters? How do we treat our spouses? And so I think both now and on Lag BaOmer, now and on Shavuot, we should remember this important lesson, that Derech Eretz Kadma LaTorah, that yes, in every Kabbalat HaTorah we have, it's not just enough to accept the Torah. It's not just enough to say, yes, we'll learn, yes, we'll do the mitzvot. It's not enough unless we reaffirm our dedication to treating each other right and to constantly improve in the way we are bein Adam l'chaviro. Wishing you a happy Lag BaOmer. Thank you.